The gospel is bigger than we think. Now, here's something that might surprise you. There's not a single verse in the Bible that says we're going to go to heaven. Not even one. Now, I discovered this early in my pastoral ministry when people used to ask me, what really happens to us when we die? What's the afterlife really like? And I'd give the standard evangelical answers that I grew up with, but honestly, I never felt entirely comfortable with those answers that I was giving. So I did an exhaustive study of every verse about life after death, and I read every book I could on the subject. And it turns out almost nothing I believed was actually biblical or true. Now, that was quite a shock. Most of what I thought came from Western culture steeped in Greek mythology rather than any kind of authentic biblical teaching. But here's the good news, the actual truth is far better than that myth that I was telling people. My name is David Kowalik of Godwit Ministries, and you join me today for the final in this short series based in 1 Corinthians 15 concerning the gospel as far as Paul is concerned. So what is Paul's big vision of the gospel based in 1 Corinthians 15? Now, we've already dealt with this to some degree, and we've seen how Paul sees the death and the resurrection of Jesus. But today we're going to explore the rest of that chapter and see the big implications, the cosmic implications that are grounded in the resurrected body of Jesus Christ. Now, Paul emphasizes that the disciples and he himself were witnesses of the resurrected body of Jesus Christ. They saw him resurrected. Now, this is absolutely crucial, because they saw Jesus bodily raised from the dead. He wasn't some kind of spirit being or an ethereal entity, but he was a man in a glorified body. He could eat and drink, and he could be touched. He was real flesh and blood, though clearly transformed. And this gives us a clue about our own future glorification. So the big plan isn't to whisk us away to some kind of spiritual heaven. Rather, it's for us to become fully glorified sons and daughters of God on earth, not in heaven. And that's what the Lord's Prayer means. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth, just like it's now being done in heaven. But the final goal is that there would be something happening here on earth in physical bodies. So God's will is for humanity to be restored, glorified, and then reinstated to our original calling, ruling and reigning with Christ on earth, caring for creation and bringing it to its full glory. So our ultimate hope is tangible, it's real, it's bodily, it's earthly. It's just glorified, that is. I mean, when I say just glorified, I mean it's gloriously glorified. But we're still in bodies and we're in a tangible earth. So what about those verses that seem to indicate that we are in fact going to heaven? Say, for instance, John 14:2, where Jesus says, "In my Father's house there are many rooms, and I go to prepare a place for you." Now, in biblical language, phrases like the house of David mean the family of David. So Jesus was really saying, in my Father's family, there's a place for you. It's more about a home rather than being about a house. It's about belonging to the family, not about mansions in the sky. Unfortunately, the old King James Version translated that same passage as many mansions, which has planted the idea about castles in the clouds in our collective imagination. But that's not what Jesus meant at all. All right, so it's all about being resurrected into physical bodies. But what will our glorified bodies be like? Well, Paul asked this very same question in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 35. How are the dead raised? With what kind of body will they come? And then he goes on to use a gardening metaphor. You plant a dead seed, and soon there's a flourishing plant. You'd never guess what a tomato looks like by examining the seed. The body we bury and the resurrection body that emerges will be dramatically different. What we see now is like a seed of the glory that will one day become a tree of glory, yet the seed has exactly the same DNA as the tree. This life and the life to come are deeply connected, just as a tree is to its seed. And that's one of the reasons why the Bible only uses metaphors and symbols to describe the life to come, because it's indescribable. You know, I used to live with a friend who was completely colorblind. I mean, absolutely colorblind. He could not see anything except grayscale. So when he'd ask me to describe the color blue, I'd say, well, it's like the sky on a clear day. And he'd respond, you mean like light gray? So then I would respond, well, maybe more like the sea. And he'd say, you mean like dark gray? We just couldn't bridge the gap. Talking about the life to come, I'm afraid, is a little bit like that. And one of those metaphors is in Revelation 21, where John sees the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven onto earth. And you'll notice again that we don't go to heaven, but it's heaven comes to earth. It's God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. That's Revelation 21, verse 3. And that's the final fulfillment of all God's covenant promises. The metaphoric meaning is simple. It's heaven and earth are no longer divided. God's place is now our place too. I mean, can you imagine a world where there's no greed, no rivalry, no envy, no insiders or outsiders, where everyone is motivated to enhance their neighbour's life, where sickness and death have faded away to nothing? You know, deep down, we all long for this kind of world. In Romans 8, verses 18 to 27, Paul explains something very similar, something very remarkable. He says that the good news affects not only our humanity, but the whole of the rest of creation as well, when he writes that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time. That's Romans 8, verse 22. Think about that image for a moment. Creation isn't just sitting around passively. It's groaning, it's laboring like a woman in childbirth. As the Message translation puts it, all around us we observe a pregnant creation. The difficult times of pain throughout the world are simply birth pangs. But it's not only around us, it's within us. The Spirit of God is arousing us within. We're also feeling the birth pangs. End quote. So the key thing about pregnancy is this: the pain isn't pointless. The frustration isn't in vain. Like pregnancy, it's painful, but it's productive. The pain is producing something. The suffering we experience now is not suffering in defeat, but it's suffering towards glory. It's the already but not yet tension between living between D-Day and V-Day. You know, in the Second World War, D-Day was the day when really the war was won, that decisive battle when the invasion took place on Normandy and the other beaches, and the Allied forces were able to invade and take a position within Europe, which ultimately led to V-Day. V-Day was always going to happen, but there was a lot of suffering between D-Day, the invasion day, and V-Day, the day of victory at the end of the war. And we're living in something a little bit like that. So Paul tells us that the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. Romans 8, verse 19. And why? Because when we're restored, creation will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom of the glory of the children of God. Romans 8:21. So just as creation was implicated in our fall, it will be even more wonderfully implicated in our glorification. It's the great reversal of the glory lost in the fall of Adam and Eve. And this is the heart of gospel hope. Suffering with purpose, suffering that's producing a new life. You know, at the beginning, God said, let us create human beings in our image, in our likeness, so that, notice that, so that, or this is the reason, so that they may rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky. That's Genesis 1, verse 26. So we were created in God's likeness in order to rule, to care for and to cultivate the creation. So what this means is that reconciliation isn't about going to heaven, it's about being renewed to our original calling. And so that's the big picture that Paul paints for us in 1 Corinthians 15, or as John writes elsewhere, Dear friends, now we are children of God, sons of God. But what we will be has not yet been made known. But we know that when Christ appears, we shall be like him. That's 1 John 3, verse 2. So what John is saying, similar to what Paul is saying, is that we're already God's children, but there's so much yet to be revealed. The more we see God as he really is, the more we become who we really are, because our glory is inherently linked to God's glory. We cannot be who we are and what we are apart from or disconnected from God. This is all wrapped up in 1 Corinthians 15. The gospel, you see, is huge. It's broad, it's deep, and it's far more interesting than we may have originally thought. It's not just about forgiveness of sins. It's about the restoration of all of creation, starting with the re-glorification of humanity. The ultimate expression of God's kingdom is God's rule on earth with us as his co-regents, restored and glorified into the sonship of Jesus. Now, I hope that this helps you to see the real scope of the gospel message. I hope that's solid, it's substantial, and it's wonderfully tangible. So thanks for watching, and please help us by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and you can visit us at godwit.com.au. Bye for now. See you in the next video.